The alarm bells rang across Nexus Prime like thunder in a storm. Every sensor array in the system screamed warnings that made no sense. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthan Empire dropped his ceremonial drink as the numbers flooded his screen. A massive fleet had just appeared at the edge of the star system. "Impossible," whispered Counselor Vexara of the Altarian Republic. Her 6 arms moved quickly across her control panel, checking the readings again and again. The sensors must be broken. But the sensors were not broken. At the edge of the system, 2,000 ships hung in perfect formation. Their hulls were dark metal, scarred by centuries of war, but their arrangement was flawless. Not one ship was out of place. They made no sound, sent no messages, and gave no warnings. They simply waited. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the alien space station through the main screen. His gray hair and lined face showed his age, but his blue eyes were sharp and cold. Next to him, Captain Lisa Harper read numbers from her tablet. "All ships report ready, Admiral," she said. Her voice was calm, but her hands shook slightly. 300 years we have waited for this moment." Jake nodded slowly. 300 years since the galaxy had declared humanity extinct. 300 years since the alien races had watched the Kethmori swarm destroy human worlds, one by one. 300 years since the Galactic Council had voted to abandon human space, calling humans too weak to save and not worth the cost. The aliens had been wrong about many things, but they had been most wrong about humanity's ability to survive. "Sir," said Commander Pete Sullivan from his station, "we're getting signals from all over the system. They're trying to scan us, but our shields are holding." "Let them scan," Jake said. "Let them see what we have become." On Nexus Prime, the emergency council meeting was chaos. Representatives from dozens of species shouted at each other in their native languages. The translation systems could barely keep up. "The humans are extinct," roared General Thox of the Brutani war clans. "We saw their worlds burn. We counted their dead." "Then explain those ships," said Ambassador Krill of the Sector Trade Union. His tentacles pointed at the holographic display showing the human fleet. "Those are not ghosts." Dr. Silas of the Academic Coalition pulled up old records on his screen. "According to our files, the last human died on the colony world of Haven Prime in 2387. The Kethmori swarm consumed everything. Everything we could. See?" corrected Elder Nara of the Peaceful Worlds Alliance. She was old even by her species standards, and she remembered the vote that had sealed humanity's fate. "We never searched beyond the galactic rim." The truth was simple and terrible. When the Kethmori swarm had come for humanity, the Galactic Council had made a choice. They could spend resources to help defend human space, or they could let the humans die and keep their own worlds safe. They had chosen safety over justice. Now the survivors had returned. Admiral Morrison walked to the communications station. Lieutenant Sam Carter looked up at him with nervous eyes. The young man had been born in the dark between galaxies, had never seen an alien face except in history books and war footage. "Open a channel to the station," Jake ordered. "Audio only." "Channel open, sir." Jake took a deep breath. His first words to the galaxy in 3 centuries had to be chosen carefully. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Human Expeditionary Force. We have returned." The silence that followed was deafening. On Nexus Prime, every representative stared at their screens in shock. The voice was human, speaking perfect galactic standard language but with an accent they had never heard before. "Admiral Morrison," came the shaky voice of Ambassador Zethkar. We were told humanity was extinct." "You were told many things," Jake replied. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of 3 centuries of pain. Most of them were lies. "Captain," Harper moved to stand beside him. She had lost her parents when she was 5 years old, during the evacuation of Earth's moon colonies. Like most of the fleet, she had grown up on stories of home, of blue skies and green grass that none of them had ever seen. "Sir," she whispered. "They're launching defense fleets from 3 different worlds." Jake nodded. He had expected this. Fear made people do stupid things, and the galaxy was very afraid right now. All ships, maintain formation, he commanded over the fleet channel. Do not power weapons unless fired upon. We are not here to start a war. But even as he spoke, Jake knew that war might come anyway. The galaxy had made its choice 300 years ago. They had decided that humanity was expendable. Now they would learn the cost of that decision. Commander Sullivan reported from his station, "Admiral, I'm reading weapon charges from the alien fleets. They're taking defensive positions around the station." "Of course they are," Jake said. "They know what they did to us. They know we have every right to be angry." Dr. Amy Chen emerged from the elevator at the back of the bridge. She carried a datapad filled with historical records, evidence of the galaxy's betrayal. As the fleet's chief historian, she had spent decades preparing for this moment. "Admiral," she said, "shall I begin transmitting the historical files?" "Not yet," Jake replied. "Let them worry first. Let them remember what they did. Let them wonder what we learned in the dark." The human fleet remained perfectly still, like predators waiting to strike. Their advanced sensors mapped every military installation in the system, recorded every ship movement, cataloged every weakness. But they fired no shots, made no threats, sent no demands. They simply existed, and that was terrifying enough. On the station, emergency meetings continued through the night. Some species called for immediate attack, others for negotiation, still, others for complete evacuation. But they all shared the same fear. What had humanity become during their long exile? The answer hung in space above them, 2,000 ships strong, silent as death and twice as patient. Admiral Morrison looked out at the stars and remembered Earth's last sunset, 300 years ago. Tomorrow, the galaxy would begin to understand the price of abandoning those who had called them friends. Tonight, humanity's long journey home had finally ended. Dr. Amy Chen walked through the quiet halls of the UES Remembrance, humanity's great library ship. The walls were lined with data crystals containing every piece of human history that had been saved during the Great Exodus. Her footsteps echoed in the silence as she made her way to the archive vault. 3 days had passed since the fleet's arrival at Nexus Prime. 3 days of silence from the humans, and 3 days of growing panic among the alien species. Amy's job was to prepare the evidence that would soon be presented to the Galactic Court. Evidence of betrayal, abandonment, and genocide. She pulled up the first file on her screen. The date stamp read March 15, 2387, the day the Galactic Council had voted to abandon human space to the Kethmori swarm. Amy had watched this recording 1,000 times, but it still made her angry. The motion to provide military assistance to the human colonies is hereby rejected, announced the council speaker, a tall alien with blue skin and silver eyes. The council finds that humanity lacks the genetic potential for advancement and poses no strategic value to galactic civilization. Amy paused the recording and rubbed her tired eyes. She had been only 10 years old when the vote was taken, living on a research station in the Outer Rim. She remembered her mother crying, remembered the emergency evacuation drills, remembered the fear in every adult's voice. Captain Ben Taylor was having his own reunion with the past. His stealth ship, the UES Shadow, moved quietly through the ruins of New Angeles, once humanity's greatest colony world. The planet's surface was still scarred from the swarm's attack, great black craters where cities used to stand. "Jesus," whispered Lieutenant Carol Davis, his communications officer. She was young, born in exile like most of the crew, and had never seen a human world before. "How many people lived here?" 40 million, Ben replied, his voice heavy with memory. "I was stationed here when the swarm came. We held them off for 6 days while the evacuation ships loaded civilians. Through the ship's cameras, they could see the remains of the spaceport where Ben had made his last stand. The concrete was melted and twisted, but he could still recognize the landing pad where he had watched the final transport ship escape. "Into hyperspace, sir," said Ensign Mike Foster from the sensor station. "I'm picking up something strange in Sector 7. It looks like a monument." Ben frowned and changed course toward the coordinates. What they found made his heart stop. Rising from the ruins was a massive stone structure, clearly built after the swarm attack. Carved into its surface were names, thousands upon thousands of human names. "My God," Carol whispered, "who built this?" Ben's hands moved across his controls, scanning the monument with every sensor they had. The answer came back impossible. The stone was alien in origin, but the carving was definitely human work. "Someone survived," he said quietly. "Someone stayed behind and built this memorial." Fleet Admiral Susan Grant sat in her command center aboard the UES Vengeance, reviewing psychological profiles of every alien species in the Galactic Council. Her staff worked around her in organized chaos, preparing for the confrontation that would soon come. Colonel Ryan Murphy, her intelligence chief, approached with a new report. "Admiral, we've confirmed which species voted to abandon us. 37. Races voted yes, 12 voted no, and 8 abstained." Susan nodded grimly. She had suspected the numbers would be bad, but seeing them in writing still hurt. "What about the species that profited from our territory?" The Vorthan Empire claimed. 6 former human worlds, answered Major Kelly Brooks, reading from her tablet. "They're mining operations now. The Altarians took control of our trade routes. The Sector Trade Union divided up our commercial assets." "And the Keth Mori swarm?" Susan asked, though she already knew the answer would make her angry. Colonel Murphy's face darkened. "Our intelligence confirms what we suspected, Admiral. The swarm isn't natural. It was created and deployed by the Thraxian Defense Combine as a biological weapon to clear undesirable populations from valuable territory." Susan closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The Thraxians had not only voted to abandon humanity, they had been the ones who sent the monsters that destroyed human worlds in the first place. "How many species know the truth about the Thraxians?" she asked. "According to our data, at least, 15 species in the Council know or suspect the truth," Kelly replied. "They've remained silent to avoid becoming targets themselves." Dr. Amy Chen had moved on to more recent files now, recordings made by human survivors in the years after the Exodus. One caught her attention, a message from Commander Lisa Harper's father, recorded just before his death. "We built our new homes, in the dark between galaxies," the old man said, his face weathered by years of struggle. "We found things out here, ruins of civilizations that died long before the current galactic powers achieved spaceflight. We learned from them. We grew stronger." The recording continued. "My daughter will never see Earth, but she will see justice. The galaxy abandoned us when we needed help, but they made a mistake. They assumed we would simply die quietly. They forgot that humans have never been good at dying quietly." Amy switched to another file, this one showing the construction of the first human shipyard in exile. Massive automated factories built in the shadow of an ancient alien megastructure, churning out warships with technology that combined human engineering with discoveries made in the galactic graveyard. "We're not building these ships for conquest," explained the chief engineer in the recording. "We're building them for protection. Protection for ourselves and for anyone else the galaxy decides isn't worth saving." Captain Ben Taylor had moved on from New Angeles to Terra Nova, humanity's agricultural center. Here the damage was different. The swarm had consumed everything organic, leaving behind a world of bare rock and poisoned soil. But here too they found evidence of survivors. Hidden in the mountains were cave systems that had been expanded and fortified, emergency supply caches that had been maintained for decades after the attack, and most importantly, a hidden transmission station that was still broadcasting. "This is Terra Nova Emergency Station 7, came the recorded message. "If any human ships receive this signal, know that 12,000 survivors remained on this world for 67 years after the swarm attack. We rebuilt what we could. We remembered who we were, and we waited for you to come home." Ben's eyes filled with tears as he listened to the names of the dead, read aloud by survivors who had kept the memory of their lost world alive even as they slowly died from radiation poisoning and starvation. Back on the UES Remembrance, Dr. Amy Chen compiled her final report. The evidence was overwhelming. The Galactic Council had not simply abandoned humanity. They had actively participated in genocide, either through direct action like the Thraxians, or through willful ignorance like most of the others. But Amy had also found something else in the records, something that gave her hope. Scattered throughout the galaxy were small groups of aliens who had tried to help, scientists who had sent warnings about the swarm, traders who had smuggled human refugees to safety, even a few military officers who had disobeyed orders to help with evacuations. The galaxy isn't entirely evil, she said to herself as she sealed the data files. Just mostly cowardly. Admiral Morrison received all the reports as they came in, the evidence of betrayal, the discovery of survivors who had been left behind, the proof that the Kethmori swarm had been a weapon deployed by a species that now sat in judgment of others. "Sir?" said Captain Harper, entering his ready room with a cup of coffee. "The alien fleets are still maintaining defensive positions, but they haven't powered weapons. I think they're waiting to see what we do." Jake sipped his coffee and stared out at the stars. "They're scared, Lisa. They know what they did, and they know we have every right to be angry about it." "Are we going to attack, sir?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. "That depends on them. If they're willing to face the truth about what they did, if they're willing to make amends, then maybe we can find another way. But if they try to cover it up, if they try to justify genocide..." He didn't finish the sentence, but Lisa understood. Humanity had spent 300 years preparing for this moment. They had become something new in their exile, something stronger and more dangerous than the galaxy had ever imagined. The question now was whether the galaxy would choose justice or repeat the mistakes of the past. Ambassador Emma Rodriguez walked through the great hall of the Altarian High Court, her footsteps echoing off marble walls that had witnessed 1,000 years of galactic justice. Today, they would witness something unprecedented, an extinct species demanding answers from those who had condemned them to death. 5 days had passed since the human fleet's arrival, and the galaxy had spent those days in growing terror. Human probe ships had appeared throughout known space, mapping military installations and economic centers with surgical precision. They made no attacks, issued no threats, but their message was clear. "We know where you are, and we remember everything." Emma carried a single datapad containing 3 centuries of carefully preserved evidence. Behind her walked 2 human Marines, their black uniforms bearing no decorations except a small patch showing Earth's moon, the last human world to fall to the Kethmori swarm. The courtroom was packed with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Some watched with curiosity, others with fear, and a few with something that might have been shame. At the judge's bench sat Justice Krell of the Neutral Zones, one of the few species that had voted to help humanity 3 centuries ago. "The court recognizes Ambassador Emma Rodriguez of the Human Expeditionary Force," Justice Krell announced, his voice carrying the weight of age and authority. Emma stepped forward and placed her datapad on the evidence table. "Your Honor, I come before this court not to ask for membership in galactic society, but to present evidence of crimes against sentient life committed by members of this very council." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Some representatives looked angry, others nervous. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthan Empire stood up. "This is outrageous," he declared. "The humans are extinct. This is some kind of trick." Emma turned to face him, her brown eyes cold as space. "I am very much alive, Ambassador, as are the 2 million humans currently serving in our fleet, and the 50 million more living in our colonies beyond the galactic rim." The number hit the courtroom like a physical blow. 50 million survivors, far more than anyone had imagined possible. "Furthermore," Emma continued, "we have detailed records of every vote taken by this council regarding human affairs. Would you like me to read your speech from March 15th, 2387, the one where you called humanity a genetic dead end that would weaken galactic civilization?" Zethkar sat down quickly, his face pale. Justice Krell struck his gavel. "The court will hear the evidence. Ambassador Rodriguez, you may proceed." Emma activated her datapad, and the courtroom's main screen came to life. The first image showed Earth as it had been: blue oceans, white clouds, green continents teeming with life. "This is Earth, the human homeworld," Emma said, Population 8 billion. On this date, the Galactic Council was aware that the Kethmori swarm was moving toward human space. Human representatives requested military assistance to defend their worlds. The screen changed to show the council chamber as it had been 3 centuries ago. The camera focused on the voting display as species after species cast their ballots. 37 species voted to deny aid to humanity. Emma continued. Their stated reason was that humans lacked strategic value and genetic potential for advancement. The next image made several representatives gasp. It showed New Shanghai as the swarm arrived, massive insect-like ships descending through the atmosphere while human defense forces fought desperately to protect fleeing civilians. This is what your vote looked like in practice, Emma said, her voice steady despite the horrific images. 6 billion humans died on Earth alone. Another 2 billion died defending the colony worlds you chose to abandon. Admiral Morrison entered the courtroom during the presentation. His dress uniform was pristine white, decorated only with ribbons, representing the human worlds that no longer existed. He took a seat in the observers section and watched as 3 centuries of hidden truth was finally revealed. The evidence continued for hours, recordings of human children crying for help that never came, final messages from colony governors as the swarm consumed their worlds, desperate pleas from human military commanders begging for backup that was deliberately withheld. Perhaps most damning, Emma said as the presentation neared its end, is evidence that the Kethmori swarm was not a natural phenomenon. The courtroom fell silent. This was new information, something that even the Council's intelligence services had only suspected. 3 years ago, our forces captured a swarm hive ship and extracted its biological control systems, Emma explained. What we found was proof that the swarm is a created biological weapon, designed and deployed by the Thraxian Defense Combine to clear undesirable populations from valuable territory. General Thox of the Thraxian Defense Combine leaped to his feet, his forearms waving in agitation. Lies, propaganda. The humans seek to blame us for their own weakness. Emma smiled coldly and activated another file. The screen showed a Thraxian laboratory, complete with Kethmori specimens in containment units and detailed genetic modification records. This footage was taken from your own research facility on Thraxis Prime, she said. Note the date stamp, 2 years before the swarm's first recorded attack on human space. The evidence was undeniable. The Thraxians had created the swarm specifically to destroy humanity, then convince the Council to abandon human space so the weapon could do its work. Just as Krell called for a recess as the implications sank in, the galaxy had not simply failed to protect an ally. They had been accomplices to genocide. During the break, Admiral Morrison approached Emma in the corridor outside the courtroom. How are they taking it? He asked. About as well as we expected, she replied. Some species are genuinely horrified to learn the truth. Others are trying to figure out how to cover it up. And the Thraxians are preparing for war. Jake nodded. He had expected as much. Are you ready for the next phase? Emma checked her watch. According to the plan, Captain Harper's intelligence team would be releasing additional evidence to the galactic news networks in approximately 1 hour. By tomorrow, every species in the galaxy would know the truth about humanity's destruction. The question, Emma said, is whether the galaxy will choose justice or try to bury the truth again. When court resumed, Justice Krell's expression was grim. The court has reviewed the evidence presented by Ambassador Rodriguez. The charges are unprecedented in scope and severity. How does the human expeditionary force wish to proceed? Emma stood and faced the assembled representatives. We demand 3 things. First, formal acknowledgement by this council that humanity was abandoned to genocide. Second, reparations to be paid to the survivors and their descendants. Third, the immediate arrest and trial of all Thraxian officials involved in the creation and deployment of the Kethmori swarm. The courtroom erupted in angry voices. Some species shouted support for the human demands. Others protested the implications for their own past actions. General Thox declared that Thraxia would never submit to human justice. Admiral Morrison stood and walked to the center of the courtroom. His presence commanded immediate silence. 300 years ago, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber, humanity came to you as friends. We asked for help against a threat we couldn't face alone. You chose to let us die, rather than risk your own comfort. He paused, looking directly at each representative who had voted against humanity. We survived anyway. We grew strong in the dark spaces between galaxies. We learned technologies you can't imagine. We built fleets that could conquer this entire galaxy if we chose to do so. The silence was deafening. Every alien in the room understood the threat implicit in his words. But we didn't return for conquest, Jake continued. We returned for justice. The question now is whether you'll choose to provide it willingly, or whether we'll be forced to take it. Justice Krill struck his gavel. The court will recess for deliberation. The council has 24 hours to respond to humanity's demands. As the courtroom emptied, Emma and Admiral Morrison stood together, watching the alien representatives flee in fear and confusion. Think they'll do the right thing? Emma asked. Jake looked out through the great windows at the human fleet hanging in space above them. 2,000 ships of war and justice. Some will, he said. Others won't. That's when things get interesting. The trial had ended, but the real test of galactic civilization was just beginning. The Nexus incident began at exactly 0847 Galactic Standard Time, when the Thraxian Defense Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. General Thox had made his choice. Rather than face trial for genocide, he would destroy the human fleet and claim they had attacked first. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the tactical display as 60 Thraxian warships moved into attack formation. Around him, his crew prepared for the battle they had all known would eventually come. Sir, reported Captain Harper from the communications station, we're receiving demands from the Thraxian fleet to surrender immediately for processing as war criminals. Jake almost smiled. Even now, facing a fleet that had spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment, the aliens still thought they could dictate terms to humanity. All ships, battle stations, he ordered calmly. Rules of engagement are authorized. Show them what we learned in the dark. The Thraxian attack began with a coordinated missile strike. 300 nuclear warheads launched simultaneously at the human fleet. On any other day, against any other enemy, it would have been devastating. Instead, the missiles simply vanished. Point defense systems engaged, reported Commander Pete Sullivan from his tactical station. All incoming ordnance neutralized. The Thraxians had launched enough firepower to destroy a moon, and the humans had swatted it aside like insects. But Jake wasn't finished demonstrating the gap in technology. Launch fighters, he ordered. Show them how we dance. Captain Steve Allen led the first wave of human fighters into battle. His squadron moved through space like deadly shadows, their ships incorporating technology salvaged from ancient alien ruins and refined through centuries of desperate innovation. The Thraxian fighter pilots never had a chance. Allen's fighters moved through enemy formations with impossible grace, their weapons firing energy beams that sliced through Thraxian hulls like they were made of paper. In less than 5 minutes, the Thraxian fighter screen had been completely destroyed. Jesus, whispered Lieutenant Carol Davis, monitoring the battle from the UES shadow. I've never seen anything like this. Commander Rachel Torres coordinated the human point defense network from the UES Guardian, her screens showing missile after missile being intercepted before they could reach their targets. The Thraxian weapons were impressive by galactic standards, but humanity had spent 3 centuries fighting something far worse than conventional warships. All enemy missiles neutralized, she reported. They're not even getting close. General, Thox watched from his flagship as his carefully planned attack fell apart. The human ships moved with coordination that seemed impossible, their weapons fired with precision that defied physics, and their defenses held against everything he could throw at them. Fire the planet crackers, he ordered desperately. Maximum. Yield! The planet cracker missiles were the Thraxian military's most powerful weapons, designed to shatter asteroid fortresses and break the crust of enemy worlds. 6 of them launched from the Thraxian flagship, their antimatter warheads capable of destroying small moons. Admiral Morrison watched the missiles approach and felt a cold anger settle in his chest. planet crackers. The same weapons the Thraxians had used to shatter human worlds 3 centuries ago. "Target the flagship," he ordered. "Return fire." The UES Retribution's main gun had been built using technology reverse-engineered from weapons found in the galactic graveyard. When it fired, space itself seemed to bend around the energy beam. The Thraxian flagship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a massive warship bristling with weapons and armor. The next moment, there was empty space and a cloud of rapidly expanding particles. "My God," breathed Captain Harper. "What did we just do?" "Justice," Jake replied simply. "The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, the Thraxian defense fleet had been systematically dismantled by weapons that seemed to rewrite the laws of physics. But to the watching galaxy, the most shocking moment came next. Instead of finishing off the crippled enemy ships, the human fleet immediately began rescue operations. Medical shuttles launched from human ships, racing toward Thraxian vessels that were venting atmosphere and losing life support. Human damage control teams boarded enemy ships to help with emergency repairs. Human doctors worked alongside their own medics to treat wounded Thraxian soldiers. "All survivors will be treated according to galactic conventions," Admiral Morrison announced on an open channel. "Medical assistance is being provided regardless of species or allegiance." Admiral Susan Grant watched the rescue operations from the UES Vengeance and felt pride mix with sorrow in her chest. This was who humanity had chosen to become. Warriors who fought with devastating efficiency, but who never forgot the value of life. "Ma'am," reported Colonel Ryan Murphy, "we're detecting massive hyperspace signatures throughout the system. Someone's coming through." The signatures belonged to the Kethmori swarm. The battle between humans and Thraxians had generated energy readings that acted like a dinner bell to the insectoid monsters. Hive ships began dropping out of hyperspace at multiple points around the system, their organic hulls pulsing with hungry anticipation. For the first time in galactic history, the swarm faced prey that didn't run. "All human ships, form up for anti-swarm operations," ordered Admiral Morrison. "Let's show these bugs what 3 centuries of preparation looks like." The Kethmori had terrorized the galaxy for millennia, consuming entire species and leaving only lifeless worlds behind. They had destroyed human civilization, devoured billions of innocent lives, and turned paradise worlds into charnel houses. Now they were going to learn what humanity had become in response. Captain Ben Taylor led the assault on the first Hive ship, his stealth vessel coordinating with a strike team of human Marines. While the main fleet engaged the swarm's escort vessels, Ben's team would board the Hive ship and plant charges in its breeding chambers. "Remember," he told his Marines as they prepared for insertion, "these things ate our children. Show them what we learned from that experience." The boarding action was swift and brutal. Human Marines moved through the Hive ship's organic corridors with practiced efficiency, their weapons designed specifically to kill Kethmori. Every tactic they used had been perfected through centuries of fighting the swarm in the dark spaces. Beyond the galaxy, Major Kelly Chen commanded the orbital bombardment that cracked swarm-breeding asteroids like eggs. Her targeting solutions were precise and devastating, each shot placed to cause maximum damage to the creature's ability to reproduce. "Direct hit on breeding chamber 7, she reported. "That's another 1,000,000 bugs that won't be hatching." The battle raged for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Kethmori swarm had never faced an enemy that understood their biology, predicted their tactics, and possessed weapons specifically designed to kill them. When the last Hive ship died, its organic hull splitting open to vent millions of dead insects into space, the galaxy finally understood what humanity had become. They had evolved beyond mere survival. They had become the cure for the galaxy's oldest nightmare. Justice Krell watched the battle's aftermath from Nexus Prime, his ancient eyes taking in the scope of humanity's victory. In less than a day, these supposed primitives had defeated 2 of the galaxy's most feared military forces. "Get me a direct line to Admiral Morrison," he ordered his staff. "The Council is ready to discuss terms." Admiral Morrison received the call while coordinating search and rescue operations for both Thraxian and Kethmori survivors. Even the insects, it seemed, deserved medical attention when they could no longer fight. "Your Honor," he said, his voice tired but steady. "I trust the Council has reached a decision?" "The Council accepts humanity's demands," Justice Krell replied immediately. "Full acknowledgement of past crimes, reparations to be negotiated, and immediate extradition of all surviving Thraxian officials." Jake nodded slowly. "And the species that profited from our destroyed worlds? The ones who built mining operations on the graves of our children? Reparations will be paid," Justice Krell assured him. "Every world, every trade route, every resource taken from human space will be compensated." "Good," Jake said. "But understand this. We're not the same species you abandoned 3 centuries ago. We've seen what happens when the strong prey on the weak. We won't let it happen again." The battle above Nexus Prime was over, but its consequences would reshape galactic civilization. Humanity had returned not as conquerors but as guardians, the sword and shield that would protect the innocent from those who would repeat the mistakes of the past. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about the price of abandoning justice. Now they would learn what it meant to live under its protection. The signing of the Second Galactic Accords took place not in the Grand Council chambers of Nexus Prime, but in the cargo bay of the UES Remembrance. Admiral Morrison had insisted on the location. Surrounded by preserved artifacts from dead human worlds, representatives of 67 species would acknowledge their failures and promise to do better. Ambassador Emma Rodriguez stood behind a simple metal table, watching as alien dignitaries filed into the improvised ceremony hall. Some came willingly, understanding that this moment would define the next 1,000 years of galactic civilization. Others came because their alternatives were much worse. "The Altarian delegation has arrived," announced Colonel Ryan Murphy, his voice echoing in the vast cargo space. "Representative Kell expresses his species' deep regret for past actions and their commitment to the new order." Emma nodded and made a note on her tablet. The Altarians had been among the first to accept responsibility for their role in humanity's abandonment. Their reparations included the return of all former human trade routes and a commitment to fund refugee assistance programs throughout the galaxy. Admiral Morrison entered the ceremony hall wearing his dress uniform, the ribbons on his chest representing every human world lost to the Kethmori swarm. Behind him walked Fleet Admiral Susan Grant, who would soon take on new responsibilities as the galaxy's protector. "All delegations are present," reported Captain Lisa Harper. "We're ready to begin." The ceremony itself was simple. One by one, the species that had voted to abandon humanity stepped forward to sign the accords. Each signature represented not just an admission of guilt, but a promise to support the new galactic order that humanity would oversee. Justice Krell served as witness to the proceedings, his ancient voice reading each article of the new treaty, aloud. The terms were comprehensive: acknowledgement of past crimes, reparations to human survivors, and most importantly, the establishment of humanity as the guardians of galactic justice. Article 7, Justice Krell announced. "The Human Expeditionary Force is hereby granted authority to intervene in any conflict where civilian populations are threatened by extermination or genocide. This authority supersedes all existing treaties and territorial claims." Some aliens shifted uncomfortably at those words, but no one protested. They had all seen what happened to the Thraxian defense fleet. They understood that humanity now possessed both the capability and the moral authority to enforce galactic peace. Dr. Amy Chen watched the ceremony from the observation deck above, the cargo bay. Around her, displays showed the preserved history of humanity's golden age: art, literature, music, and scientific discoveries from Earth and the colony worlds. All of it had been saved during the Great Exodus, carried across the dark void by people who refused to let human culture die. "It's strange," she said to Commander Pete Sullivan, who stood beside her. "We're finally getting justice for what happened to us, but it doesn't bring back the dead." Pete nodded slowly. "Maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is making sure it never happens again." Below them, the Vorthan Empire's representative signed the accords with 4 of his arms, the traditional gesture of absolute commitment among his species. The Vorthans would be returning 6 former human worlds and paying reparations equal to their gross planetary income for the next 50 years. The sector trade union's delegation signed next, their spider-like appendages moving carefully across the document. They would be dismantling their mining operations on human grave worlds and establishing memorial parks at each location. When the last signature was complete, Admiral Morrison stepped forward to address the assembled delegates. 300 years ago, humanity came to you seeking friendship and cooperation, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the large space. You chose abandonment over alliance, convenience over courage. The result was the near extinction of an entire species. He paused, looking directly at each delegation in turn. Today we choose differently. Despite everything you did to us, despite the deaths of billions of our people, we choose to be your protectors rather than your conquerors. But understand, this protection comes with conditions. The conditions were already outlined in the Accords, but Morrison wanted to make them absolutely clear. The galaxy would be watched, monitored, and protected by humanity. Any species that threatened civilian populations would face the full might of the human expeditionary force. We are not your rulers, Morrison continued. We are your guardians. We will protect the weak from the strong, the innocent from the predatory, and the helpless from those who would exploit them. This is humanity's gift to a galaxy that once left us to die. Ambassador Emma Rodriguez was formally appointed as humanity's first Chancellor of the Galactic Council, a new position that gave humans veto power over any military action. Her first official act was to establish the War Crimes Tribunal that would try surviving Thraxian officials for their role in creating the Keth Mori swarm. The trials themselves were swift but fair. Evidence was presented with surgical precision, testimony was heard from survivors across the galaxy, and justice was delivered without mercy but also without cruelty. The guilty were sentenced not to death, but to exile in the same dark spaces where humanity had learned to survive. Let them build something better than what they destroyed, Emma announced after the final sentencing. Let them learn what it means to start over with nothing but hope. Captain Steve Allen found himself appointed as commander of the Memorial Fleet, a new division of human ships dedicated to ensuring that the galaxy never forgot the cost of abandoning the innocent. Each vessel carried the names of every human world lost to the swarm, and every species that had suffered similar fates throughout galactic history. His flagship, the UES Never Again, patrolled former Keth Mori breeding grounds, now converted into memorial sites where visitors could learn about the consequences of genocide and the importance of standing together against extinction. Dr. Patricia Williams established the Xenological Research Institute on New Geneva Station, humanity's first permanent installation in galactic space. Her teams worked to understand and catalog every species in the galaxy, with particular attention to identifying potential threats before they could act. Knowledge is our best defense against future tragedies, she explained to a gathering of alien scientists. If we understand each other, we can protect each other. The station itself became a symbol of humanity's new role in galactic civilization. Its gardens contained plants from Earth and the colony worlds, grown in soil mixed with dirt from every human grave world. Children of dozens of species played together in those gardens, learning the languages of peace in a place built from the memory of war. Admiral Morrison kept his promise about humanity's role as guardians. When the Zephyrian Confederacy attempted to enslave a primitive species in the Outer Rim, human ships arrived within hours to stop them. When pirates threatened refugee convoys fleeing economic collapse, human escorts appeared to guide them to safety. Each intervention was swift, precise, and overwhelming. The galaxy learned quickly that humanity's protection was not a bluff. It was a promise backed by technology and determination that had been forged in the crucible of near extinction. Captain Rachel Torres commanded the rapid response fleets that served as humanity's first line of intervention. Her ships could cross the galaxy in days rather than weeks, arriving wherever injustice threatened to repeat the mistakes of the past. We're not trying to build an empire, she explained to a gathering of young officers. We're trying to build a civilization worth protecting. 5 years after the signing of the Second Galactic Accords, Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of the UES Retribution, watching human children play in the gardens of New Geneva Station. They were surrounded by alien children of a dozen species, all learning together in schools that taught the history of both triumph and tragedy. Captain Harper joined him at the window, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a tablet with the day's reports. The latest survey shows that armed conflicts throughout the galaxy are down 70% since we established the Guardian Fleet, she said. Refugee assistance requests are up 200%, but we're handling them. Jake nodded and sipped his coffee. Good. What about the deep space monitoring stations? All operational. If another Keth Mori-type threat emerges, we'll detect it months before it reaches inhabited space. They watched in comfortable silence as the children played. Among them was Morrison's own granddaughter, a girl who would never know the fear that had driven her grandfather across the dark void between galaxies. She would grow up in a galaxy protected by the sacrifices of those who came before her. Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing? Harper asked quietly. We had the power to conquer the entire galaxy. Instead, we chose to protect it. Morrison smiled and thought about the question. Lisa, my generation learned something in the dark that the galaxy had forgotten. The strong exist to protect the weak, not exploit them. Civilization isn't about who has the biggest ships or the most territory. It's about who stands up when the innocent need defending. He gestured toward the playing children. Those kids will inherit a galaxy where genocide is impossible, where the strong can't prey on the weak, where no species will ever face extinction alone.